You know that feeling when you're scrolling through social media and you see someone posting about their investment portfolio, showing off these massive numbers that make your stomach drop a little? Or maybe you're sitting at dinner with friends and someone starts talking about how they're diversified across multiple asset classes, and you're just trying to figure out if you can afford to split the check? I've been there, and I'm guessing you have too. My name is Joe, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, wealth distribution, and why most of us feel like we're constantly falling behind when it comes to building wealth. If you're someone who wants to understand what it actually takes to be in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders and why that number is shockingly small, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Here's something that's going to blow your mind. You only need 0.1 Bitcoin to be in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders worldwide. Let me say that again because it's so counterintuitive that most people don't believe it at first. 0.1 Bitcoin. That's it. It's roughly $10,000 at current prices. That's less than most people spend on a used car. That's about what many people spend on a vacation. And yet owning just 0.1 Bitcoin puts you ahead of 99% of everyone else who owns Bitcoin on this planet. But here's the thing. I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want to show you the math. I want to show you the actual data, the real numbers, and the undeniable proof that this isn't some hype or exaggeration. This is the cold, hard reality of Bitcoin distribution. Before we dive into the numbers, let me ask you something. When you think about the top 1% of anything, what comes to mind? Do you picture billionaires with private jets? Do you think about people who have millions of dollars in the bank? Do you assume that being in the top 1% requires some level of wealth that's completely out of reach for normal people like you and me? Most of us have been conditioned to believe that the top 1% is this exclusive club that's basically impossible to join unless you're already wealthy. We think about the top 1% of income earners in the United States, which requires making over $500,000 per year, or the top 1% of wealth holders, which requires having a net worth of over $10 million. But Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin doesn't care about your income. Bitcoin doesn't care about your net worth. Bitcoin doesn't care about your job title or your education level or who your parents are. Bitcoin is this beautiful, brutal, mathematical system that treats everyone exactly the same. And the distribution of Bitcoin tells a story that most people completely miss. Now let me walk you through the actual numbers, and I want you to really think about what these numbers mean. According to the most recent data, there are approximately 19.5 million Bitcoin in circulation right now. That's it. That's all there will ever be because Bitcoin has a hard cap of 21 million coins. This scarcity is built into the code, and it's one of the things that makes Bitcoin so fascinating. But here's where it gets interesting. How many people actually own Bitcoin? This is where the math starts to get a little mind-bending because the answer depends on how you count. But let me give you the most conservative estimates, the numbers that even the skeptics agree on. Most studies suggest there are somewhere between 100 million and 200 million unique Bitcoin addresses worldwide. But here's the kicker. Many people have multiple addresses. Some exchanges hold Bitcoin for millions of customers. Some people have wallets they forgot about years ago. When you really dig into the data and try to figure out how many actual individual humans own Bitcoin, the consensus among researchers is somewhere around 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Let me say that again. Somewhere between 50 and 100 million people own Bitcoin globally. Now let's do some simple math together. If there are, let's say, 100 million people who own Bitcoin, and there are 19.5 million Bitcoin in circulation, that means the average Bitcoin holder owns about 0.195 Bitcoin. But here's the thing about averages. They can be incredibly misleading. Because in the world of Bitcoin, the distribution is extremely skewed. There are some people who own thousands of Bitcoin. There are some companies that hold tens of thousands of Bitcoin. There are governments that have seized Bitcoin in criminal cases. And then there are millions of people who own tiny fractions of a Bitcoin. Just a few dollars worth, maybe less. When you look at the actual distribution curve, what you find is shocking. According to multiple analyses of blockchain data, the vast majority of Bitcoin addresses hold less than 0.01 Bitcoin. That's less than $1,000 at current prices. We're talking about people who own just a few $100s worth, maybe even less. Here's the number that really matters. Approximately 1% of all Bitcoin addresses hold more than 0.1 Bitcoin. Let me say that one more time because this is the entire point of this video. About 1% of Bitcoin holders own more than 0.1 Bitcoin. That means if you own just 0.1 Bitcoin, which again is about $10,000, you're already in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders worldwide. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be saying, but Joe, that's just 0.1 Bitcoin. That's not enough to change my life. That's not enough to retire on. That's not enough to make me wealthy. And you're right. 0.1 Bitcoin by itself is not enough to retire on. It's not enough to quit your job tomorrow and live on a beach for the rest of your life. But here's what you're missing. Being in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders isn't about having enough Bitcoin to retire today. It's about positioning yourself for what happens next. Think about it this way. If Bitcoin continues to grow, if it continues to be adopted by more and more people, if it continues to be integrated into the financial system, if it continues to prove itself as a store of value, then that 0.1 Bitcoin you own today could be worth significantly more in the future. But here's the thing that most people don't understand. People who own 0.1 Bitcoin today aren't just buying Bitcoin. They're buying a membership in an exclusive club that's only going to get smaller over time. Why? Because Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. And as more and more people discover Bitcoin and want to own it, the amount of Bitcoin available per person is going to decrease. Let me give you a concrete example to help you wrap your head around this. Right now, let's say there are about 100 million people who own Bitcoin. That means there are about 0.195 Bitcoin available per person, on average. But imagine what happens if 1 billion people start owning Bitcoin. That's not unrealistic. There are already billions of people with smartphones, and Bitcoin is becoming easier and easier to buy and hold. If 1 billion people own Bitcoin, and there are still 19.5 million Bitcoin in circulation, that means there would be about 0.0195 Bitcoin available per person. That means the average person would own less than 0.02 Bitcoin. If you own 0.1 Bitcoin in that scenario, you wouldn't just be in the top 1%. You'd be in the top 0.1%. You'd own more than 5 times what the average person owns. And here's the crazy part. This isn't some distant future scenario. This is happening right now. Every day, more people are discovering Bitcoin. Every day, more companies are starting to accept Bitcoin. Every day, more countries are creating regulatory frameworks for Bitcoin. The number of Bitcoin holders is growing, but the supply of Bitcoin is fixed. Do you see where this is going? The 0.1 Bitcoin that puts you in the top 1% today is going to put you in an even more exclusive position in the future. Now, let me be really clear about something, because I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not telling you to go out and put your life savings into Bitcoin. I'm not telling you to sell your house and buy Bitcoin. I'm not telling you to take on debt to buy Bitcoin. That would be irresponsible, and that's not what I'm about. What I'm telling you is this. The barrier to entry for being in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders is shockingly low. And understanding this changes how you should think about Bitcoin. Most people look at Bitcoin and they think, I missed the boat. I should have bought it when it was $100 or $1,000 or $10,000. Now it's too expensive. But here's the thing. They're not thinking about the math. Because even at 60K per Bitcoin, or 100,000 per Bitcoin, or whatever the price is when you're watching this video, the amount of Bitcoin you need to own to be in the top 1% hasn't changed. It's still 0.1 Bitcoin. The price in dollars doesn't matter for your position in the distribution. What matters is how much Bitcoin you own relative to everyone else. And here's the beautiful, brutal truth about Bitcoin. The distribution is extremely unequal, but it's also extremely accessible. You don't need to be wealthy to own 0.1 Bitcoin. You don't need to have a high-paying job. You don't need to have $1 million in the bank. You just need to save a little bit of money consistently over time. Let me give you a concrete example. If you set aside $500 per month, less than many people spend on rent or car payments or dining out, you could accumulate 0.1 Bitcoin in about a year, depending on the price. It's not easy, I know. Saving $500 per month requires sacrifice. It means making different choices about how you spend your money. It means delaying gratification. But here's the thing. Most people spend $500 per month on things that don't really matter. They spend it on subscriptions they don't use. They spend it on meals out that they don't remember. They spend it on clothes they don't wear. What if you made a different choice? What if you said, you know what? For the next year, I'm going to prioritize my future over my present. I'm going to buy 0.1 Bitcoin and put myself in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. And here's the thing that most people don't realize. Once you own 0.1 Bitcoin, something shifts in your psychology. You're not just someone who's interested in Bitcoin anymore. You're someone who has skin in the game. You're someone who's actually part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. And that changes how you think about everything. You start paying more attention to what's happening in the Bitcoin world. You start understanding the technology better. You start making better decisions about your money. Because here's the truth. It's not just about the Bitcoin. It's about becoming the type of person who thinks long-term. It's about becoming the type of person who makes decisions based on where you want to be in 10 or 20 years, not just what feels good today. And that's the real game changer. Now, let me address something that I know some of you are thinking. Some of you are watching this and you're saying, but Joe, what if Bitcoin crashes? What if it goes to zero? What if all of this is just a bubble? And I want to be honest with you about this. Yes, Bitcoin could crash. Yes, it could lose a significant amount of value. Yes, there are real risks involved in owning Bitcoin. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Bitcoin is risk-free because that would be a lie. Anything that can go up 100% in a year can also go down 50% in a year. That's just how markets work. But here's the thing, I'm not telling you to bet your entire financial future on Bitcoin. I'm telling you that the barrier to entry for being in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders is 0.1 Bitcoin. And if you believe, even a little bit, that Bitcoin has a future, then owning 0.1 Bitcoin is a no-brainer. Because here's the reality, you can't be in the top 1% of almost anything else for $10,000. You can't be in the top 1% of income earners for $10,000. You can't be in the top 1% of wealth holders for $10,000. You can't be in the top 1% of real estate owners for $10,000. But you can be in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders for $10,000. And that's extraordinary. Think about that for a second. There are literally millions of people who spend $10,000 on things that have zero chance of putting them in the top 1% of anything. They spend $10,000 on a vacation that's over in a week. They spend $10,000 on a car that loses value the moment they drive it off the lot. They spend $10,000 on clothes that are going to be out of style in a year. But they won't spend $10,000 on something that could put them in the top 1% of a global asset class. Why? Because they don't understand the math, they don't understand the distribution, they don't understand the opportunity. And that's exactly why I made this video. Because once you understand the math, once you really grasp what it means to own 0.1 Bitcoin, you can't unsee it. You start to realize that the barrier to entry is incredibly low. You start to realize that being in the top 1% is actually achievable for normal people. You start to realize that you don't have to be wealthy to start building wealth. And that's incredibly empowering. Now, let me share something with you that I don't talk about very often. When I first started learning about Bitcoin, I made the same mistake that most people make. I looked at the price and I thought, it's too expensive. I missed it. I should have bought it earlier. And I didn't buy any. For years, I watched from the sidelines as the price went up and down, never quite pulling the trigger, always telling myself that I'd buy it when the price drops or when I have more money. And you know what happened? The price kept going up over the long term. And I kept missing out. It wasn't until I really understood the distribution, until I realized that I only needed 0.1 Bitcoin to be in the top 1%, that I finally took action. And here's the thing. I wish I had taken action sooner. Not because the price would have been lower, not because I would have made more money, but because I would have started thinking differently sooner. I would have started making better decisions with my money sooner. I would have started building for my future sooner. That's the real opportunity cost. It's not the money you lose by not buying Bitcoin. It's the time you lose by not changing how you think. And here's the thing about automatic savings. It removes the psychological barrier that prevents most people from investing. Most people don't invest because they're busy, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed, they have too many decisions to make. When you automate your investing, you remove the decision-making process from the equation. You just set it and forget it. And that's incredibly powerful. Now, I want to address something that I know some of you are thinking. Some of you are watching this and you're saying, but Joe, I don't have $500 per month to invest. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I can barely afford my rent and my bills. This sounds great, but it's not realistic for me. And I hear you. I know that not everyone is in a position to set aside $500 per month. I know that some people are genuinely struggling just to make ends meet. But here's the thing. Even if you can only set aside $50 per month or $25 per month or even $10 per month, you're still making progress. Because here's the truth. It's not about the amount you invest. It's about the habit you're building. When you start investing even a small amount, you're telling yourself that your future matters. You're telling yourself that you're willing to make sacrifices today for a better tomorrow. You're telling yourself that you're not just going to let life happen to you. You're going to take control of your financial future. And that mindset shift is worth more than any amount of money. Let me give you an example. If you can only set aside $25 per month, it's going to take you a lot longer to accumulate 0.1 Bitcoin. We're talking years, maybe even a decade, depending on the price. But here's the thing. In 5 or 10 years, you're going to have 0.1 Bitcoin. And more importantly, you're going to have built the habit of investing. You're going to have trained yourself to think long term. You're going to have proven to yourself that you can make sacrifices for your future. And that's incredibly valuable. Now, let me be really clear about something. I'm not telling you that Bitcoin is going to make you rich. I'm not telling you that Bitcoin is guaranteed to go up in value. I'm not telling you that Bitcoin is the best investment for everyone. What I'm telling you is this. The math on Bitcoin distribution is clear. The barrier to entry for being in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders is 0.1 Bitcoin. And if you believe, even a little bit, that Bitcoin has a future, then owning 0.1 Bitcoin is a rational decision. Because here's the reality. Very few opportunities in life give you the chance to be in the top 1% of something for a relatively small amount of money. Most exclusive clubs require you to already be wealthy. Most elite communities require you to already have connections. Most top-tier positions require you to already have experience. But Bitcoin doesn't care about any of that. Bitcoin just cares about whether you own it or not. And that's incredibly democratizing. Now, let me share something with you that I think is really important. I've been studying wealth and personal finance for a long time. I've read dozens of books. I've watched hundreds of videos. I've talked to wealthy people and poor people and everyone in between. And here's what I've learned. Most people never accumulate significant wealth because they never start. They're always waiting for the perfect time. They're always waiting for more money. They're always waiting for more information. They're always waiting for someone to give them permission. But here's the thing. There is no perfect time. There's no perfect moment. There's no perfect set of circumstances. You just have to start. And that's what I love about Bitcoin. The barrier to entry is incredibly low. You don't need a lot of money to get started. You don't need a lot of knowledge to get started. You don't need a lot of time to get started. You just need to start. And once you own even a tiny amount of Bitcoin, something shifts. You're not just an observer anymore. You're a participant. You're not just watching from the sidelines anymore. You're in the game. And that's incredibly empowering. Now, let me wrap this up with some final thoughts. I know that some of you are still skeptical. I know that some of you think Bitcoin is a bubble. I know that some of you think this is all too good to be true. And that's okay. Skepticism is healthy. Critical thinking is important. Not every opportunity is right for every person. But here's what I want you to take away from this video. The math on Bitcoin distribution is clear. Approximately 1% of Bitcoin holders own more than 0.1 Bitcoin. That means you only need 0.1 Bitcoin to be in the top 1%. Here's the thing. This isn't about getting rich quick. This isn't about making a fortune overnight. This isn't about timing the market perfectly. This is about positioning yourself for the future. This is about making a conscious decision to be in the top 1% of something. This is about taking control of your financial future. Because here's the truth. Most people are never going to be in the top 1% of income earners. Most people are never going to be in the top 1% of wealth holders. Most people are never going to be in the top 1% of anything. But you can be in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. And that's extraordinary. So here's my challenge to you. If you don't own any Bitcoin yet, I want you to consider buying just 0.1 Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be all at once. You can dollar cost average into it over time. You can set up automatic transfers. You can do whatever works for your budget and your situation. But I want you to set that goal. I want you to make that commitment to yourself. I want you to decide that you're going to be in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. And if you already own some Bitcoin, I want you to look at how much you have. If you have less than 0.1 Bitcoin, I want you to think about how you can get to that 0.1 Bitcoin mark. And if you already have more than 0.1 Bitcoin, congratulations, you're already in the top 1%. Here's the thing, don't stop there. Because the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, there's no limit to how high you can climb. There's no limit to what you can achieve if you're willing to think long-term and make smart decisions. Now, before I go, I want to leave you with one final thought. The reason I'm so passionate about this topic, the reason I spent so much time researching this and making this video, is not because I want you to buy Bitcoin. I don't care whether you buy Bitcoin or not. That's your decision, and I respect whatever decision you make. What I care about is that you understand the math. What I care about is that you see the opportunity. What I care about is that you realize that being in the top 1% of something is actually achievable for normal people like you and me. Because here's the truth. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that the top 1% is this exclusive club that's basically impossible to join unless you're already wealthy or well-connected. But Bitcoin proves that's not true. Bitcoin shows us that the barrier to entry can be incredibly low. Bitcoin shows us that we don't need to be special to be in the top 1%. Bitcoin shows us that we just need to make a decision and take action, and that's incredibly empowering. So here's my final message to you. Don't overthink this. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait for more information. Just start. Buy 0.1 Bitcoin. Put yourself in the top 1% and see what happens when you decide to be someone who thinks long-term instead of short-term. I promise you, it will change how you think about everything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.